Okay, seems like we're live now.
Yeah, and we're live. Let's see if our visual aids pop up. Then we should be in good shape. Thanks
There's
everybody
no
who's
better
coming in.
visual than you.
Oh yeah, yeah.
On
Thank
this
you,
one.
thank you, thank you. You too, you too. And of course we have the same, stylist. We're same haircut. Even though we're on the opposite sides of the globe, we're twins here. Anyway, thank you everybody. I know there's people still joining, but we're gonna let it rip. This will be recorded, and you'll have access to slides and recordings afterwards. Drop a comment if you're interested in having a copy of the slides on LinkedIn here, and we'll make sure you get a copy. We're going to be discussing when ransomware strikes and really kind of what you're having to deal with as far as recovery after an incident and really how to protect that recovery. So we're going to be talking about immutable backups and MDR in this discussion. And I'm Art O'Kane. I'm VP of Cybersecurity, and Dmytro here is from UnderDefense. And we are going to have this discussion and hopefully enlighten everybody. So feel free to drop comments, questions, etc. in the chat as we go, and let's get some involvement, and so we can, make it interactive with everybody.
And before we move further, I'd like to, you know what? I'd like to read something. So here's verbatim what it means. 2024 has seen the largest ransomware payment ever recorded at approximately 75 million
Ooh,
to the Dark Angels ransomware group.
ooh,
It's unclear who exactly paid it, but it's supposed to be some company in the Fortune 50.
wow.
What a good
Th-
way to start this. So, whenever you start talking about the security, people usually start this from some technical perspective, from some tool set, from the computing and stuff.
Yep.
But why don't you start by pulling up numbers and just showing how serious this stuff is?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. We know about business impact. Because anybody who's experienced ransomware, this is something that's everybody has to deal with, and it is usually takes your organization down for weeks. And
Yeah.
unless you have an amazing backup plan with immutable backups, usually recovery can take months. And these days, 96% of companies with a trusted good backup and recovery scenario are able to recover. So we're getting good at not having threat actors pay the ransom, but that's been a learning experience. Companies have had to deal with a lot of pain. So more than 50% of companies over the last, 5 years have experienced outage longer than a workday because of ransomware. And 93% of businesses without a DR plan do suffer a, a major disaster within 1 year. So it is very impactful these days. And when we're talking about ransoms, you're talking about $75 million. I've seen several $50 million ransoms, and nobody's insurance plan can sustain that. You know,
Yeah,
so
that's for sure.
yeah, so it's really it's coming out of pocket, it's coming out of your shareholders, it's coming out of financing. You're having to really pull strings if you need to pay that ransom. So let's make sure that we don't have to pay that ransom. That's our key here. Let's not pay the ransom.
Yeah,
All right, let's.
that's absolutely right. And from the topic of the today's conversation, it seemed like a very simple thing. Like, okay, immutable backups sounds simple, but I think we're gonna dive a little deep in this today and give the guys an idea, not only the general idea of how this works, but what to actually do and how to implement this and what are the potential pitfalls, what they're going to be looking for. So,
uh,
if you don't mind it, I'd like you to introduce yourself to the
yep,
guys who haven't yet seen you in the past.
yep. Yeah, so I'm Art O'Kane with Airiam, and Airiam does managed services, managed security services, and incident response. And I lead the incident response side of the company. So we deal with a lot of incidents. Um, you know, this page shows really 75,000 plus hours. Now it's edging more towards 100,000 hours, and incidents. Now we're well over 100 incidents that we've had to do, and we're edging 200 now. So we have a lot of in-depth frontline experience in having to respond to incidents, dealing with whether it's ransomware or other kinds of incidents, business email compromise, executive account takeovers and things like that, as well as banking trojans and other kinds of malware. But we are on the front lines every day, sometimes as many as 10 incidents at a time, managing and doing the recovery. So instead of just incident response and forensics, we'll do the full life cycle, and we actually specialize in the recovery part of the incident.
Okay, sounds very good. Sounds very good. So, as for me, I'm Dmytro Shevtsov. My name is not the easiest for guys on the western side of the globe, but still, I am a head of partnerships at UnderDefense. And speaking of UnderDefense, we basically help businesses stay safe from cyber threats. And it's basically a team of cyber experts who become your security partners rather than your just average SOC as a service. We specialize in cloud managed detection and response, backing you up during difficult times while giving you back control over your security. We perform automation of cloud SecOps and deep forensics, proactive threat hunting, which I totally vouch for. Every time we discuss the security strategies, we got fourth spot among 180 SOC teams. That's Splunk, boss of the SOC, and show extremely fast reaction to critical incidents in real life too. Not only the competitions like that. And it's been more than 6 years now of continuous serving to our clients. So be sure to ask your questions and join the list of these successfully looking clients. So today's webinar is directed towards a very complex topic. And we divided it in few, I would say, major points or blocks, if you will. So we're going to talk about the ransomware because, it's a pretty familiar topic for, especially for the guys who are listening right now, because they're experts in the niche. Still, we're going to be talking about this a bit, about cyber resilience framework, which is important because you need a framework to do things successfully. We're going to talk about the immutable backups, how to implement those, what it is, and about maintaining the incident response and disaster recovery runbooks. And of course, there's going to be Q&A session, so stay for this one. It's going to be fun. Okay. So, a great question. Has your organization ever experienced a ransomware attack? And this is a very fun thing because, the size of ransom is huge. But, it's something very outstanding. And there's many other occasions where you're casually hacked, compromised, and asked for much smaller ransom, but it's still a ransom. So have you ever experienced this, guys? Let us know in the comments. We want to see you guys and be able to respond to you and see if you can give us some idea on who you work with. That would be really good. So be
Yeah.
sure to join us in the chat. I would like to actually talk a little about the security controls because when we start building a strategy for company security, it's important to implement proper solutions for that to make the right decisions. And the journey of a CISO, of a CIO in this regard, it can be way different from company to company. And it's important to implement, like, it's a very complex scheme. It's many layers of things, and you usually start from the very top, like implementing WAFs, implementing multi-factor authentication, and you go up there, as you can see on this graph, and at some point in time, you already have your first layer secured, and now you need to implement something more complex, something that will actually be not that reactive, but a part of a proactive approach. So at this point, you're looking for endpoint detection and response. You're looking for managed detection and response. And you are looking potentially for proper, secure backups. And this is a major topic for today's conversation. So I'd like you, Art, to give your input into the topic of the backups, why
Mhm.
they're so important, how this
Yeah.
usually works in your case with your clients.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when we're talking about, secure backups, that's really your recovery path. And the reason why it's so important in an attack is, usually you'll have your traditional on-prem backups, and those will get, usually attacked because the threat actor can see your backup storage, and they will take that down. I still recommend that you keep on-prem traditional storage backups because that's often your fastest recovery in other kind of outage, like a server goes down or you're trying to migrate systems, things like that. But I'm recommending that everyone implements a immutable backup layer, and whether it's the same technology or another technology, and I recommend going to the cloud, and using immutable storage in the cloud, so that you're taking a copy of your backup and storing it there, so that it can't be tampered with by the threat actor, so that in a worst case scenario you can download that copy and restore. And that's why I recommend still keeping an on-prem copy, because if there is an incident, you may have to download terabytes of data from the cloud, or restore to the cloud. So it may not be the most convenient restore scenario, but it's your fail safe. It is, your last ditch effort if you're under, if you experience a ransomware or other destructive attack, wiper, etc. That immutable backup is kind of the thing that hasn't successfully been attacked so far. The threat actor will, if they see that you have an immutable backup solution, they'll try to tamper with your backup schedules, etc. But usually they're not able to affect your data unless you've leaked your creds. If your creds have been leaked, they may be able to log into that immutable backup solution and then, delete your subscription, and then a couple weeks later they finally drop it, that kind of thing. But in a and the idea behind immutable storage is that, it can't be tampered with, it can't be changed, it can't be deleted. And even if your creds are breached, usually there's a retention policy, so even if they do try to delete that data, it's going to be there for at least a couple weeks before it is your subscription is deleted, that kind of thing. So right now, I think of it as a fail safe. It can be if you have really fast connection, if you have, really kind of a hybrid connection, or if you are cloud based, you can restore to the cloud very quickly from a cloud backup solution. But being a cloud backup solution isn't enough. It's really that word immutable is what you want to be looking for.
Yeah, and basically speaking, we're talking about this not only for the sake of just keeping the data safe. The
Mhm,
main idea is to preserve the business continuity.
mhm,
And as a part of it, it's just a part of an overall strategy. We're going to dive into it today. But before we do this deeply, let me actually show you guys. Can we please shift to the next slide? So when we speak about the security, it's generally a twofold thing. So on one hand, you need to do everything in your power in order to not let bad things happen to you. On the other hand, you need to always have a strategy on what to do if these things actually happen.
mhm.
So uh, it's always both sides.
Yes.
And talking about the pre-breach protection is crucial. With ransomware attacks averaging from 4.5 million in damages these days, it's
Mhm,
clear that being proactive can save us a lot of heartache and cash. So instead of waiting for something to happen, let's get ahead of it. Being proactive means finding and fixing vulnerabilities before attackers can exploit them.
mhm,
And CISA has made it clear that taking these steps can really cut down the chances of a successful breach. So think of it as a fire drill for cyber attacks during the regular simulations can help your team know exactly what to do if the real thing hits.
mhm,
So you know the companies that practice these drills feel way more prepared when the stakes are high, especially. And penetration tests, regular pen tests are likely, like having a friendly hacker check your defenses. And companies that do this often end up with far fewer vulnerabilities, which is a huge win for security because they're not that low hanging fruit that's easy to
Yes.
pick. And in the case of security monitoring with managed threat hunting, this is about having eyes on your systems 24/7. When you combine constant monitoring with managed threat hunting, you can catch suspicious activities way earlier.
Mhm.
And actually, Gartner's research shows that organizations that doing it, they respond to threats much more effectively because they're prepared. This is a simple idea. So I'd like your input on the post-breach activities because I know Airiam works with this a lot.
Oh yeah, yeah. So on the pre-breach side, like you were mentioning, the idea is, if you have any kind of attack and you really have these layers of pre-breach, you're minimizing your blast radius. You're minimizing the amount of impact. I like to assume that you're always getting breached. That there's always an attacker that's somehow successful. That's kind of the approach I take. But the idea is you want to make that as hard for the attacker as possible to actually be successful in you know stopping your business operations. And when they do, you need to be able to recover quickly. So post breach, we have a whole incident response process where we're identifying what's going on. We're identifying the threat actor, doing that forensic analysis. We're doing negotiations. We're containing the attack, containing it to the systems that are affected, and then creating a recovery environment. We're figuring out what was taken and doing that data mining and figuring out what notifications need to be sent to users, etc. And we're also having to constantly look and make sure that that threat actor is evicted from the environment. We don't want the threat actor to keep performing actions, keep exfiltrating data, we don't want their presence to exist in the network anymore. So there's a lot of work that, really the under defense team has to do, covering our back while we're doing recovery in order to protect us, and really their SOC is engaged, doing threat hunting actively, looking for that. And then recovery, we're rebuilding systems. If you don't have immutable backups, we're having to either you're paying the ransom and we're decrypting systems, which is not fast for some reason. They can decrypt your entire network they can encrypt your entire network overnight, but when we go to decrypt, it might take a week to decrypt. Their decryption tools are not effective and efficient, so they take a long time. And that's if you pay the ransom. If you can't afford to pay the ransom or you decide not to, it's just your ethical stance of your company. If you're not paying the ransom, we have to rebuild systems from scratch. And so what we find is a lot of companies, uh, you know, we're having to prioritize their systems, say, okay, Active Directory first, then your financial systems, your messaging systems, basic infrastructure systems. And it may take months to recover you. We've had 3 months, 6-month engagements where we're rebuilding systems, painstakingly rebuilding thousands of servers, redeploying the applications to them, starting you off from scratch. And if there is a backup of data, restoring that backup of the data to it. But without a full system immutable backup, that's a really long process. And then the resilience phase is really looking for improvements. It's saying, okay, we've done this. How do we make it so there is some business continuity going forward? How do we make sure there is some segmentation in the network going forward? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? And you had traditional antivirus. Let's put in some real EDR. Let's make sure it's monitored. Let's make sure that there's privileged access management around your credentials. There's a lot of steps here in order to really protect you going forward, so that we don't want to recover you to the same place you were when you got breached and then just leave you, because then you're going to get hit tomorrow. We want to make sure
Absolutely.
that we're improving your stance.
Yeah, and you know what? Hard to disagree with everything you just said, but I wanted to point out a couple of things. Thing number one, you just pointed out really important idea that obtaining the key is not a guarantee that you're going to restore your business.
Hmm.
It's not a guarantee. You can pay the ransom and still have a hard time trying to get back.
Yep.
Another important thing is that all this amount of time that you just described, which needs to get recovery, all this time the company is losing the money.
Yes. Yeah.
And there is another important point that Yuri Carbone actually mentioned on the comments section, and I'm reading it right away. So,
Hmm.
also, the company's reputation is at stake. So,
Hmm.
recovery isn't the only thing to consider, unfortunately. Absolutely.
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 Yep.
This is the point where you're losing your customers, not only because you lost service for a little while,
Yep.
but because they are not really sure if they can trust you, especially if you store their data. They're not really
Yes.
sure. And what if you have some big clients? How fast can you recover? Who's gonna be responsible for that? And just imagine this: you need to stay in front of your very big client and explain what's happened and what you're gonna do about this, and how they can still trust you so this doesn't happen again. This is the huge point why immutable backup is a thing, actually. So I think we're not gonna be staying on this post bridge slide right here for long. Let's actually switch to the next one because this is a very good point. So
Mm.
let's dive into the key areas that we can make a real difference in your security approach.
Absolutely.
So identify ongoing or past intrusions. This is also something you brought up just now. So,
Mhm.
uh, first off, Admin Security Operations Center or SOC as a service means you've got a team monitoring your systems around the clock. They'll help you spot, any ongoing or past intrusions, giving you peace of mind, basically, because that's what you need as a CISO. That nothing's gonna, slipping through the cracks of your walls. Think of it as having, a security guard on the watch constantly. Assess security risks uh, and identify weaknesses. We need to take a good look at our security architecture. This means actually quite like a pinpointing vulnerabilities, misconfigurations. This is very important. Misconfigurations are a huge source, and even those policy violations. By understanding where these weak spots are, we can take steps to resolve them. And a solid consulting partner can help, you know, write a good starting line for you. This is where if you don't have a strong internal team that's gonna do this for you, you can start away with a partner like UnderDefense or Airiam. Actually, where do you usually start when companies come to you and they start building their strategy from the ground up?
Yeah, yeah. So I want to look at what they have in place, if anything, policies, IR plans, DR plans, et cetera, and do an assessment. I want to kind of really assess their risk and really, identify where they are right now. And so looking at cyber maturity, and that's really something that I manage for a lot of clients, is really identifying where they are, because a lot of people think they're really cyber mature, but really they don't have anything, and they're very reactive, and they're very dependent upon service providers, which is fine, but they have no integration with them, and they have no real kind of plan to get back. So, usually I'm trying to level them up in their cyber maturity, and but the first step is just identifying where they are, and that can be a painful lesson for some of these companies that think that they're really in a great place, and you're just like, okay, it's great that you have these providers, but do they talk to each other? How are they alerting you? What are the SLAs? What are they actually doing for you? Are they actually responding, or are they just like letting you know, hey, you have ransomware? There's a spectrum of quality of service with service providers, and so it's really important to dig in with the client and really understand what they have.
Absolutely, and you know what? In many cases, from what I could see with when we start working with the new clients, in many cases, when you start digging in and you realize they had no idea about real ongoing attacks because they just had no visibility whatsoever. And actually, there is a comment from a profile without the name, unfortunately. or it's just not shown to me, but it's called LinkedIn user.
Mm,
So 90% of businesses without a DRP experience a disaster within 1 year.
mm,
That's just brilliant. That's just what it is.
mm,
That's just what it is. So you need to start by covering the basics, and uh, this is the starting point.
mm,
But you need to be prepared for what's gonna happen when the actual attack is coming your way.
mhm,
And you know what? Let's show the top 5 common ransomware attack vectors,
mhm.
because this is an important point right here. And
Absolutely. I think one of the
this is about,
important things here is that
yeah,
all these are almost most of these are credentials. Exploitable vulnerability is really kind of the exception. Everything else is really somebody getting into your network via some kind of trust. It's they have too many privileges. They've got access to the environment. Somebody's credentials have been brute force. They've been tricked into whether they're phished or whatever, or their creds have been compromised. Like almost all of these are credential based, and that's the most common ways with ransomware. It's a there are exploitable vulnerabilities used. Once they gain access to the network, they're kind of getting around using vulnerabilities that haven't been patched and stuff within your network. But I'd say in almost every attack that I deal with, it's credentials. It's somebody, there was a password spray or whatever, and the threat actor got into VPN using somebody's creds.
absolutely, absolutely. And so another an important point is that whenever there is a human factor,
Mhm.
this is the weakest point. Uh, it's not a colonial pipeline. It's I forgot about the title of the attack. I'm sorry.
Well, I
But
know
anyways,
with MGM, it was it was a support call. Somebody
yeah,
called into to help desk. The threat actor. So uh, a lot of these, it is that social engineering that's really getting the threat actor into the environment.
and recall the Stuxnet actually.
Yep.
It's huge, and
Mhm,
they were disconnected from the whole world. Still, still through the power of human beings, they
mhm,
were able to get into the network and do their job.
yep.
So you can never underestimate how human factor influencing your security posture and overall strategy. So um, you know what, this is I think this is basically understood by everybody who's in the chat right now. So why don't we go to the next point, which stands for cybersecurity cyber resilience framework actually.
Yep. So this is a based off of the cyber resiliency engineering framework from MITRE. So that framework is really anticipate, withstand, recover, and adapt. And the idea here is that you've been anticipating. Hopefully, you've been planning. So we can put zero as in this lineup as anticipate, but withstand, recover, and adapt is really what you need to do in order to be resilient. Think about resiliency as bending when you're under attack and not breaking. You're able to still perform some kind of services for your clients. You're able to deal with the attack, and really resilient companies. You know, a lot of large companies are constantly under attack. It's every day there's new attacks coming at them, and so the ability to withstand, and then when there is something that's service impacting, recover quickly, and then evolve and change. Really adapt your posture and adapt your technology and your processes and your people around the new attacks coming at you, because the threat actor is constantly learning about their failure and constantly coming
Yeah.
at you with some new attack. So you need to evolve your defenses as well. I think the idea of just buying something, signing a 3-year contract, and just leaving it alone for the next 3 years
Oh
is
yeah.
does not work. Yeah, you need to constantly level up what you're doing.
Absolutely. And would you mind me just taking a second
Hmm.
of your amazing speech, because I want to pay attention to this comment from LinkedIn user one more time.
Hmm.
So, what should we look for when choosing an MDR provider to help protect against a ransomware attack? So, it's important to note that when you have a ransomware attack, time works against you,
Mm.
and it's good to have SOC team. It's good to have SOC as a service, for example. But in case of ransomware attack, it's A good amount of proper automation
Mhm.
goes a long way.
Yep.
And having an MDR provider who can set up your tools right, perform proper security hardening, identify the threats really fast, and the mean time to react the MTTR is important here because once again, time works against you here. So the ability of your MDR provider to gain enough information to actually pick the right decision
Mhm.
and start the right processes is important.
Yep.
And from this regard, it's important to have the proper data enrichment when you have something
Yes.
like a SOAR in place, for example.
Yep.
Also, if there's a possibility, like we at UnderDefense, here's what we do: we have a possibility of not only enriching the data for every alert, there's also an automated playbook for every kind of alert.
Mhm.
And the reaction to a ransomware attack starts automatically.
Mhm.
So, all this period of time, while your security analyst is receiving the alert, starts working with it, starts analyzing it, making a decision, and preparing to respond to it. All this time, the automated playbook is already in place, it's already working. So it minimizes the chances for attacker to be successful. So security is always like this triad about people, processes, and tools,
Mhm.
and you need to utilize them properly. What would you actually say about this, Art?
Yeah, I would say that there's some differences in level of service, like I mentioned, between MDR providers. Some people are just alerting, and so they have this automation, and then there's an alert that comes to you. But really, I mean, they're kind of asleep at the wheel. They're not really doing anything. And that alert comes to you and says, hey, we've identified initial access here. There's some lateral movement. And this is probably made by their automated playbook, which is good. But a lot of times there's no follow up and response. That is their response. Like, that is literally all you get. And so nobody's actually stopping anything from happening or changing anything or isolating anything, or and so a to me, an MDR provider that actually does the R part of MDR and does
Yeah,
more than just detection but actually
absolutely.
responds, that's crucial. And then the other part is that when you want to be able to talk to people. So if you need help, if there is an incident going on, are you working through a ticketing system and then have like a 30-minute or an hour SLA for responses on that? Like, when there's an incident going on, I want to be able to engage a team and be able to have some kind of live interaction when there's something going on. And if everything is kind of behind the scenes, you may not have that. So those capabilities, having that actual response and having a team behind that automation is important to me.
Yeah,
And then on top of that, really it's that threat hunting. So a lot of people are using automated threat hunting, which is great, and they may have some AI and they may have some playbooks and stuff like that. But is somebody actually driving this? And is somebody actually helping build new threat detection and threat engineering into the system? That's what I'm looking for. Is, as attacks evolve, is there someone actually involved in that team, and or a whole team to do threat engineering and threat detection, to do advanced threat hunting in your network. Whether it's a person drilling in and looking at logs, that's always a plus, but I mean, that's not really scalable. But is there a person that is building that threat hunting into the system actively every day? That's something that you want. And it's really hard to ferret that out when you're talking to MDR providers. Everybody's like, yeah, I do threat hunting. So it's something almost you need a POC with the company to figure out really how good they are.
yeah, that's like actually a good point. You actually ended at a very good point. And when you start talking to your MDR provider, it's a good idea to not only get introduced to a person like me or personal person like Art.
Mhm.
If you have a possibility to talk to their director of MDR,
Mhm.
VP of engineering, somebody who's gonna be working with the team directly, somebody who has been involved in building it, and get your questions answered, and see whether it's a real security partner for you or it's just a pre-configured thing that you buy as it is. And another important thing is that um, whenever you start looking into MDR solutions, you usually already have some tools and processes in place. It's very rare that you come for MDR provider when you have nothing. So it's good if you can actually find an MDR provider like UnderDefense who can actually turn your existing tools and processes into a working machine and not force you to purchase a lot of stuff to start over.
Yes.
This is very important. If you don't mind it, I can see a question from Adam Piper right here. So Adam says, I'm focused on renewable energy and wondered if you are seeing an uptick of attacks on this sector and critical national infrastructure. My answer is yes, because first of all, the overall amount of attacks is increasing.
Mhm.
By 2025, as far as I remember, we're gonna expect an attack every 2 seconds.
Mhm.
So this is a very serious issue. And speaking of critical national infrastructure, considering the number of countries who start backing up their hacker group on a national level,
Mhm.
you can expect a drastic increase because they're going to be targeting critical national infrastructure in order to make you their victim.
Yep.
Because this is the politics. It's not only the technical thing, it's not only the money, it's also about politics now. So you need to be prepared all the time.
Yeah, it becomes nation state attacks then instead of just somebody trying to make a couple bucks off of you. It can be both, but a lot of them are directed by the nation state. They're telling that threat actor group to target you. So, but yeah, we have seen an uptick in that. We've seen a lot of also, healthcare, financial, manufacturing. There's been, just widespread increase, but critical infrastructure in general is under a lot of attack, and energy sector. If somebody's like, if we're just talking about the U.S., if somebody wants to take down the U.S., that's really how to do it. It's take down our energy. So that's really why it is such an attack vector or attack a risky sector to be in. Yep.
Another important point here is that knowing how energy sector likes updating their stuff,
Hmm.
knowing how critical national infrastructure like investing in security,
Hmm.
in most cases, the investments are going towards making more money,
Hmm.
not on securing your stuff, not on updating servers, not on getting more people who are involved in security. In most cases, they're gonna cut the funding for the security stuff, for investment, for investing into security tools, and maybe MDR. And this is a very bad trend considering that the number of attacks is actually increasing every year. And we've been talking about the historical maximum of a ransom, 75 million.
Hmm.
Guys, this is gonna be not the biggest. Just enjoy how it's gonna change with time. Be sure. I bet all the guys in the chat know this, that it's gonna be only increasing with time. Because this is how it goes. Whenever we have a precedent of companies paying the ransom, it's gonna be opening the doors for hacking groups to be targeting your industry. That's just how it's happening. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. I think we made an interesting step out of the topic, but it's very
Yeah,
interesting. I believe you
absolutely.
are to talk about this for months probably.
Absolutely. Yeah, let me run through these real quick. So, what
Sure.
are immutable backups? I already kind of mentioned that they are, unchangeable, undeletable storage. So you want your a copy of your backups to be on storage that can't be altered or tampered with. And the reason is because threat actors are looking for your backups. Like that is how they are going to get paid, by making sure that your backups are not usable. So they'll encrypt them or delete them and make sure that you cannot recover from your backups. So that's why it's important. All right, let's go to the next slide. Now, I just kind of discussed this, but uh, you know, we want to make sure that you have immutable backups, because you're under attack and your backups are under attack. You're Even if you have a DR site, I've seen it several times where the DR site is completely encrypted. I've seen it where people have a SAN and they have snapshotting, and they're like, "Oh, great, we'll just restore from our snapshot on our NetApp or our EMC or our Pure Storage." And this happens several times where the admin creds are captured for that. Whether it's an active session in somebody's browser, or somehow those creds are captured for that SAN, and then the threat actor turns off that snapshotting. So there's no snapshot to recover from. So, uh, you know, basically my concept is, if don't trust your storage solutions on-prem. You still want those great storage solutions, but you need a fail safe. And it may be slower to have a cloud-based immutable backup solution, but it's going to ensure business continuity in those situations where a threat actor is in your environment. They're angling for that $50 million ransom, and they're making sure that you have no other way to recover with your on-prem solutions.
Always assume the attack. Always.
Yep. All right, let's go on. All right, now I already discussed this, but really we have this. I've dealt with a lot of recoveries, small businesses up to Fortune 500 companies, and we had a Fortune 500 company that took 3 months, over 3 months to recover, because they didn't have immutable backups. And it was really this situation where threat actor encrypted their backups, threat actor encrypted their or deleted their snapshots, and encrypted their DR sites as well as all their data centers. And they had several data centers, and really it was a full stop to all operations. And we got Active Directory up after a few days, then it was financial up after a few more days, and but full recovery, so that they were really able to manufacture goods and sell products, was over
Hmm.
3 months.
Yeah.
And this is a large enterprise, major brand affected because they didn't have any immutable storage. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right. So let's continue on from this, because I've already talked about that. It's really immutable backups are bulletproof because the storage is not alterable. The concept is that storage will not, because of permissions on it, because of where it's located, because it's air gapped, etc. That storage cannot be tampered with. And let's go to the next slide. All right, so we did a manufacturer. This was a very recent one. Their VMware environment was completely compromised. Basically, the threat actor came in through VPN, attacked VMware, and then attempted to delete their backups, and did delete all their on-prem backups, and there was nothing to recover from with their on-prem solution. But they were not able to affect their immutable copy. And the threat actor was trying to change the backup schedules, and try to play with the software for the immutable cloud backups, but they weren't able to affect them. Really, they weren't able to affect the historical backups. So we were able to get the company back up and running in 48 hours. So yeah, it's not a complete failover. They weren't up and running in 4 hours. There was a lot of data to recover, but 3+ months versus 48 hours. So we were able to get them up and running in 48 hours. Really, by Monday, this happened on a Friday. By Monday, they were up and running, and they were good. So
That's
that,
actually amazing.
yeah, exactly. That's what we can do if we have something solid to recover from. And without that, it's a long grind of just rebuilding everything from scratch. All
Especially
right.
when you're dealing with stuff such as Faust, for example,
Yes.
which alters a copy of its own altered file.
Hmm. Yep. Absolutely. And so, if we have a cloud backup, we're able to, if it's a mutable cloud backup, it usually allows us to recover anywhere we want. So we can recover you to AWS, GCP, to Azure, to an on-prem data center of your choice. So in this case, we just restored them to Azure. We knew that the data is in the cloud. We're able to restore to any cloud location very much quicker than we're able to restore on-prem. So we just decided to restore to the cloud, and that restore was just a matter of hours. So we were able to do a lot in a short amount of time, where if we were dealing with just on-prem traditional architecture, dealing with the on-prem storage, and the internet connection to download the backups, like, it would have just been extremely painful. So
Yeah.
this allowed us to get moving and to get the company up and running, so they're able to serve clients. Then we were able to do that forensic investigation and clean up their on-prem stuff, and then you know make sure that it's contained, and the threat actors eradicated, and then move their stuff back on-prem. So it gave us options, and that's what I
Mhm.
really like in this kind of scenario is having kind of alternative ways to get you back up and running, and making money.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and so that your reputation doesn't fail, generally speaking.
Absolutely. Let's go on to kind of best practices. And yep, we have a best practices slide here, and it is really talking about increasing backup frequency. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about that. Um, you know, a lot of companies just do a nightly backup, which is fine if the data doesn't change that often. If you're, a file that a server that is not undergoing a lot of change, let's say a print server, a daily backup's fine. But if you have a transactional database, you want to back up very frequently, maybe every 15 minutes, maybe every hour, to minimize your data loss, in the event of something happening. So we want to not have to get you back to, 2 nights before, the incident in order to get a good backup to recover from. We want to be able to back up from 15 minutes, restore you from 15 minutes before the incident. So, increasing backup frequency obviously is going to put more load on your bandwidth, on your internet connection, more load on your servers to do that. So you have to have some decent horsepower in your data center. But the more frequent we back up, the lower our RTO ends up being, and that restore time objective, because we're able to, get you back up and running without having to go and inspect a lot of different backups. We're able to say, okay, the incident happened on this time. We're just going to back up from this time before that. So we're just going to go back, 45 minutes, that kind of thing, instead of us investigating a lot of daily backups. And then the restore, point objective, we're able to restore from, instead of a day or 2 days, we're able to have a maximum data loss of 15 minutes or a half an hour or 45 minutes, really depending on how you set it up. So this really kind of positively impacts your organization by increasing backup frequency, as long as the infrastructure can support it. All right, let's go on to 3211, and then that's pretty much the one of the biggest concepts here is, and this isn't a brand new concept. It's, we want 3 copies of data backed up. We want at least 2 different kinds of media. Why? Because a SAN fails. If you're backing up to a SAN or backing up to an AS, those things can fail. They can be attacked, etc. We want 2 different kinds of media. We want one of those copies to be off-site. And when I say offsite these days, I don't mean just to a DR site where there's a live link between them, because the threat actor jumps that live link, jumps that VPN over to your DR site. We want a copy that's offsite in, let's say, in a S3 bucket, or in Glacier or something like that. We want a copy to be air gapped and immutable. So, uh, you know, S3 buckets, there's a flag in the bucket that you can mark it immutable. The other storage types have similar, there are immutable backup technologies that we use. We want to make sure that it's air gapped. In other words, there's no live link to the data, and it's immutable, meaning it can't be changed. So those 2 things are what I consider a good, immutable backup solution. If you're just looking for air gapped, then the data can be changed. If you're just looking for immutable, then a lot of times, they can find a way to, impact the systems that you're going to recover from. We want it to, even though the storage layer is not affected, they're doing something else to the system. So we want it to be air gapped and immutable, and so I'm doing that with cloud backup solutions that are using immutable storage.
And by the way, guys, I'm absolutely sure some of you already made the screenshots, but you're gonna receive the slides, so it's totally okay.
Awesome. Awesome. Let's just
Yeah,
breeze
and we're
through, and I think we probably have some questions here. But let's talk about, really, we zip past tabletop exercises. I'll just mention that tabletop is really a practice exercise that every organization should be running. I run it like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and but there are CISA has several models on their website that you can use, and it's running through a scenario, and you should have all the stakeholders in your organization really
yeah,
kind of involved. So not just IT. It shouldn't be just security running this. It should
yeah,
be, legal. It should be your executive team, because those are the ones that are going to screw stuff up in an incident. Like, your IT team may have everything on point, but then your executive team is like, no, we need to have this up and running tomorrow, and they may be decoupled from reality, and so. That incident response plan and the tabletop exercise need to be used with your entire executive team, as well as your IT and security teams and legal, and pull in your insurance carrier. You can pull in the FBI. Bring in the stakeholders that are going to be involved in an actual incident.
yeah. You're actually building a collective muscle memory for this one. You need all your
Absolutely.
teams to be engaged in this.
Yep.
Otherwise, you
Absolutely.
don't know who's gonna fail.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that one of the important things is to, think beyond the company. So,
Mhm.
bring in your MSP, your MSSPs, your people that are external resources that are going to be, if you have outsourced legal, if you have outsourced, law enforcement, your insurance carrier, like they are all happy to participate in this with you. So, that don't just isolate to within your company, because during an actual incident, all those people are going to be sitting at the table with you.
Yeah. No
All
place for
right.
siloing.
Exactly. Exactly. Do we have any other questions to go through that have come in through LinkedIn? Okay, a quick example of a tabletop scenario. So, like I mentioned, if you go to CISA's website, they have frameworks and some sample scenarios. There's a lot online, but usually I kind of mention that I start with a business email compromise, or I start with kind of a, people came in on Monday morning and the systems are down. So let's do the latter. You get a call at 7 a.m. that IT came in and all the systems were down. Nobody's able to work. Regular staff came in at 8 and they're complaining that they aren't able to access the file server, the finance server, their timesheet server, etc. HR doesn't work, and then they're starting to wonder if they're going to get paid that week, because payroll needs to be in by Wednesday in order for them to be paid on Friday. And so they're starting to be concerned. Sales are starting to come in and customer service calls are coming in, and nobody's able to pull the CRM up. Nobody's able to pull up the service desk system, and everything is completely down. And they're wondering what to tell the customer, because they're calling and they have no answers. So this is your scenario. Okay, you have full outage. You know, Given that kind of understanding, what do you do? What's your first step? So some people, their first step is, okay, I'm going to turn off all the machines. Some people, their first step is, I'm going to unplug the internet. Some, it's, I'm going to call the FBI. So it's identifying what your plan is. I'd recommend not turning off all your machines, because those machines contain that forensic evidence, and we don't want you to shut down all the machines and end up causing an outage where servers don't boot up then, because you did a hard shutdown on them as well. So, usually leaving the machines up and running is okay, but, cutting internet is a good option, because those threat actors are getting in through the internet. So, that won't save any problems that you have, but that'll stop any ongoing communication. But walking through that and say, okay, then what's next? Once we've just done that initial thing, like, oh, we have ransomware and cut the internet, who are you calling? Do you have an internal security team? Do you have an MSSP? Do you have an IR team that you're calling? When does your organization decide to pull in the executive team? And it probably should be immediately, and let them know about the incident. And then spin up your internal IR team and engage your IR plan. And then figure out, okay, when are we pulling in cyber legal? When are we contacting our insurance carrier? At what level, like, is it stuff that we do ourselves, and at what level do we decide to call the insurance carrier? That kind of stuff is something you need to think about in your IR plan. But that's really what you're gonna those discussions are what you're gonna have during that kind of choose your own adventure situation. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so we're kind of leading you through this scenario and saying that this is what you run into. And then, okay, now people are booting up their computers and they're seeing a ransom note on their desktop. And then, how are you controlling your communication to your employees? How are you controlling it to your customers? What's the PR look like?
Yeah.
And then, how are you getting ahead of this? So there's a lot of variables to think about beyond just the technical of identifying what's going on and kicking out the threat actor. There's a lot of, the reputational impact, how to communicate to your employees, and can you communicate to your employees if servers are down? Do you have an internal messaging system you're relying on? Like, do you have a way do you have a database that to text everybody? Like, how are you handling this messaging? So there's a lot of pieces to this, and it gets really complicated. But I think that tabletop, it doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be well
Yeah.
orchestrated. Sit down with
Yeah.
the team and give them a scenario like that, and say, okay, what are you doing
Definitely.
next?
Yeah, because it's one thing to have a process written down, and it's
Mm,
second thing to actually execute it. I think
mm,
the last case with CrowdStrike actually showed that nobody was prepared, and it's one thing to know what to do, and it's different thing to do it actually.
mhm.
The
Yeah.
communication between teams. Are you sure it's gonna be smooth? Are you sure you're gonna be able to actually direct to the right person and actually move things forward? So this is not something you can expect to happen on spot. This is
Mm,
something you need to practice before you go with this. And
mm,
I see Felipe is asking a question: is there an effective way to communicate to business people of a company that has never suffered an attack in all its years of existence? The need to have expensive costs to protect itself, for sure.
mm,
First of all, the difference between you, Felipe, and that part of the company is that you realize how serious it is.
mm.
They don't, and it's your role to show them. It's not an easy role, but it's your role to show them what they are having at stake,
Mm.
because business is not gonna be thinking in terms of technical stuff. Business is not gonna be trusting a single word. And today, business is gonna say, "Okay, we're gonna dedicate a budget for this." Tomorrow, business is gonna say, "Oh, no, 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 we didn't have quite the expenses that we expected, but we had more, so we're not gonna dedicate a specific budget for security." And by the way, next year you're gonna be having a less money for security. So
Mm.
you are going to be prepared for this. And you, as a wise person, otherwise you would not be at your position, you're going to have to use your brilliant brain to know how to show them what's at stake, how
Yep.
to see how much it will cost to stop their business for one day, so they can
Absolutely.
realize, so it becomes real in
Yep.
terms of money, in terms of days, in terms of numbers, in terms of people. So it's not just an idea in their head, but they can actually count the money. In this
Yes.
case, they're gonna trust your word, and you're gonna be implementing the strategy for them this time,
Mhm.
not just doing some random stuff they don't know about, but rather you, and this is important point right here.
Mm.
You are reporting to them, and it's important to make clear for them what exactly you're doing, what partners you're dealing with, what solutions you're implementing. Once again, we've been talking about picking an MDR provider today. This is an important. You know what? I'm actually gonna show you. There is a slide number 41, if you don't mind it. So at UnderDefense, we use a lot of automation in order to actually make things work properly, because we believe it's important to speed up the processes, especially at first year. So when bad things happen to you, you don't have much time to react to that straight away. And Alisa, can we please pull up the slide number 41, if you don't mind this? Okay, thank you very much. So, uh, on our Maxi platform, which we use with our MDR service, there is an automation for incident response. So when an incident happens, you receive an alert, but from the moment that alert is received, the data enrichment begins. So whenever a real person starts investigating the case, they already have the information, not just the raw data, which gives them a possibility to act fast. And also, after the alert was received, the automated playbook already started the reaction. So you are already containing the attack in the process, which means that hacker doesn't have much time to act and doesn't have more chances to actually get really, really deep and cause a lot of harm. Is there any Andrei Sobchak is asking, is there any solution for online transactions? Backup into a immutable backup device.
Right.
Art, I think you would be able to
Yeah,
answer this question.
yeah, a lot of it depends on what you're talking about by online transactions. If we're talking about, that you have a e-commerce system and you're just trying to get transactional backups into immutable storage. A lot of it depends on what that transactional database system is. So let's say it's SQL Server, Oracle, whatever. It's setting up a job that is doing a transactional database dump and incremental. Backup of those transactions, and usually to immutable S3 storage, or using a immutable backup tool like the one we use. And so we'll set that database to do a transactional backup, like every 15 minutes. If you want individual backup, I mean individual transactions, it really depends on the architecture of your application. If you can capture that transaction, let's say transactions go into a queue before then they're processed or whatever, and you need to back up, then you can just set up a function in that queue to kick off a backup of that transaction. The individual transaction, might just be a line of text to immutable storage. So that really is from an application architecture side then. So it's like then you're taking it from backing up the whole system to just backing up specific transactions. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat, but the idea is that when you're backing that up, you need to be using immutable storage and not just writing a copy of it to disk somewhere.
And also, there's a question from Yana Petrenko, and actually, you already talked about this a
Mm,
while. But anyways, this is a good question, so why not answering it?
mm.
What's the minimum backup frequency you recommend for critical business data?
Yeah, so to me, it depends on how often it changes. So if it is critical business data, but let's say it doesn't change that often. Let's say it's something that your manufacturing team uses and has all the IP and designs, but let's say it only changes when there's a new design or a new patent or whatever, and then those systems are updated. That might be every week. That might be every month. So it really depends on how fast that data is changing. If it's very transactional stuff like that, you may want to back up every 15 minutes, so that if there is an incident, you're only losing 15 minutes of business data. So that's your financial systems, your transactional databases, your e-commerce systems, your ERP or MRP systems. Like those you may want to back up more frequently. So there's not really a minimum. My minimum would be around how fast your data changes. And so like a domain controller, stuff like that, most companies a daily thing to back up Active Directory is fine. But for a lot of those, for a highly transactional company where you're doing a million different transactions every day, you want to back that up as frequently as your systems will support.
But here is an important point here as well. You need a really reliable security partner in order to, if you're making backups really frequently, you need to make sure that these backups are just right.
Yes.
So whenever you restore from those, as Art already mentioned, it's important to make sure that you are not easy to breach again. So
Mm,
uh, having the right MDR provider will
mm,
actually help you monitor what you're having on your network, on your hosts, on every endpoint,
mm,
and make sure that you have the proactive threat hunting sessions, which will end up keeping you updated on everything and making sure that your immutable backups contain the right data so that you can restore easily and your business keeps going, because this happens when people, I think you'll actually are you will have examples for that. When we saw this, hopefully not with our clients, but anyways, we saw this happening with other companies, when companies restored from they actually paid ransom, received the
Hmm.
key, restored the data, but didn't do anything. And with the
Yes.
time, it was once again altered. The information was once again
Yes.
altered. So they needed to restore the information once again.
Yeah, we've seen lots of reinfections and reattacks where the attacker wasn't effectively eradicated from the environment. So engaging with a good MDR provider will enable you to protect that environment while you're recovering it, and also they can help validate the systems that you're recovering. So we usually, when we're recovering, we put a QA step, is what we call it. So let's say we restore a DC. Um, we'll install, an EDR on it, and we'll contact the MDR provider and say, hey, DC05 is now back up and running. Can you verify that it is clean and good and is not, compromised? And so they'll, run their scripts on it, make sure there's no signs of those signs of attack, those IOCs, and make sure that those machines are clean before we release them into production. So it's, we work hand in hand with an MDR provider in those kind of recovery scenarios.
Yeah, that's right. And one more thing, Adam Piper also mentioned there are many new cyber regulations coming globally, including NIS2 in Europe,
Hmm.
and in Australia, and many others. So clients need to be aware and be compliant. This will
Hmm.
hopefully drive positive behavior and become better prepared. That's absolutely right. Um, I'm not sure if you saw the recent changes to the compliances,
Hmm.
but they're very cool. They
Yep.
become much more structured. They
Hmm.
become it's a piece of art,
Yep.
honestly.
Yep.
Not you, but art still. Um, so they become really good. So
Hmm.
if in the past you needed somebody really specializing in audits to
Hmm.
understand what to do, to prepare
Yep.
questionnaires, to
Hmm.
actually comply with those, nowadays it's much more comprehensive.
Hmm.
And so these compliances are gonna be truly the drivers for the changes and for
Hmm.
good changes. And I believe this. I really trust this is gonna be good because
Hmm.
um, uh, the threats are evolving,
Yep.
but the compliances are evolving too. And I
Yeah.
hope this will help in general. Okay, guys. As far as I can see, there is no more questions in the comments. I hope you had a good time. I did. I truly did. And thank you, Art, for joining me today. It was really
Thank
cool.
you.
I like having this bold talks with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. I be sure to actually connect to us on LinkedIn. Be sure to visit our company's websites and check. We have a lot of good materials, both of us, UnderDefense and Airiam. And yeah, be sure to throw us a message if you want to.
Yep.
That would be very interesting to talk. And it's always interesting to talk with professionals from other companies, always. So thank you for joining us today. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you.